Hey family, are you hungry? Well, let's ring the dinner bell. Today we're going to be making my favoriteest thing. We're going to have some chicken fried steak. Now this is the thing that my mother made the best. Now I told you she had her repertoire of things that we would have throughout the week. We would have spaghetti, we would have chili, we would have chicken and rice, chicken and noodles. But the thing that I love that she made was her chicken fried steak. And remember, I told you in another episode how I learned to make gravy actually by going to stay with my great-great-grandma, and I would make her liver and onions. And although I hate liver and onions, I love the smell of it. But we're going to make that delicious chicken fried steak and gravy, probably with some mashed potatoes and maybe some fresh green peas. It's going to be a really good meal. So what we're going to do is we're just going to take some cube steak. And I actually kind of seasoned it and had it in the fridge overnight. But we're just going to take it and we're going to dredge it through some flour that I've also seasoned. I've kind of put some, my traditional things. I love onion powder, garlic powder. We've got a little bit of sage, a little bit of Old Bay seasoning, some crushed black pepper, all those wonderful spices. I think I threw something else in there. But anyway, it's going to be really good. So what we're going to do is I've already put some oil in my pan. I probably used about a quarter cup of vegetable oil. You can use canola oil or any oil of your choice. When I try to do things to cut calories and try to be a little bit healthier, I usually use either canola oil, and sometimes I'll use olive oil. But because we're making some good old gravy, we've got to just use some regular oil. So we're just going to barely fry this cube steak. We're just going to toss it in after we've dredged it with flour. We're not going to let it cook too long. I'm just going to try to get as many pieces in here as possible before I put them. Actually, that's good. I'm going to do this. Now I'm going old school. I'm going to use my lid too. So we're just going to barely turn it. So it started to fry. We're going to go ahead and turn it over. We don't want it to get like super crispy. I guess technically it's not the same way that you do chicken fried steak, because we're going to do it a little different. It's more like a smothered steak. So we're just going to lightly fry it on both sides. And then I'm just going to pop it out into my lid. I'm going to turn my heat down because I've got a few more pieces to cook. But again, we're not cooking it fully, because what we're really going to do is we're going to let it simmer and cook in that gravy. So we're just going to dredge a couple more pieces through our flour that has been seasoned. And then we're just going to go ahead and pop the other pieces of steak in. Now I kind of cut the pieces down pretty small. So it looks like we've got about 8 pieces this time. And we're just going to dredge that flour, dredge the steak in the flour. Go ahead and pop it in the oil. Let me wash my hands. They're all caked with flour. And again, we're just lightly frying. We're not going to let it stay in too long. And this actually helps make it really tender so that it doesn't get overcooked. I'm going to turn them. It's always unruly when you have people watching. And then, for those pieces that I've already just kind of flipped, again, we're going to pop them right on out of the skillet. Ooh. That's a fingers. All right. So I'm going to pop them out of the skillet and I'm popping them right into my lid. And now we've got a good base for our gravy. So you'll see all these pan fixins. We're about to use that to make our gravy. So what we're going to do first is we're going to add some onions that I have done into little rings. And we're going to kind of saute these with some mushrooms. Which is why we don't want to use too much oil. So we've got our onions in, and man, is that starting to smell good. We're going to go ahead and add our mushrooms. And we're going to kind of push them off to the side because we do want to be able to do our flour. So we're going to put our mushrooms here. And then we're going to take some of the flour that we dredged our steak in, and we're going to make our gravy. So we're just going to get that all into that oil. We're going to brown the flour, and that's going to make the base for our gravy. So we're getting that flour all in all of our excess oil. And we're making sure our little mushrooms kind of get coated with the flour. And the onions get a little coating of that flour, but we want to make sure all of it gets covered with that oil. Now I'm only doing this part in my skillet. I'm going to do this part in my skillet, but then I'm going to switch over to my little quart pot because I'm going to make, this is pretty shallow, and because I want to make a lot of gravy, we're going to go ahead and switch over to my little pan, my pot. So we're letting our onions get nice and tender. We're letting these mushrooms get nice and tender. We've got our flour in here, and we're going to get it nice and brown. Everything's kind of got a nice little coating to it. We're just going to saute that for a little bit more. Now this gravy is not going to be your traditional like thin gravy. This is going to be a good old thick country gravy, which is why we've used those. We probably used I did about 3 heaping spoons of flour, so it may be close to a 1/4 cup of flour in our oil. And I'm actually probably going to saute up another batch of mushrooms just to add a little bit later because I love mushrooms. But you don't have to. I like to make this mushroom gravy. It's like my favorite thing to do. It's one of our family's favorite comfort foods. And then I usually add it to, I usually make this kind of gravy when I make my meatloaf. It's really, really yummy. It's our family favorite, and I hope it becomes a favorite for you as well. So we've already seasoned those things up. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and transfer everything over before I add my water. I don't want to do that. Okay. So I'm probably just going to put a little bit more oil in this new pan. And I'll go ahead and saute these other mushrooms really quickly. And then we'll transfer everything over. Now I used a package of baby Belle mushrooms and regular mushrooms. And you can use any combo of mushrooms that you like. Or you can use no mushrooms at all. So I'm going to go ahead and transfer everything from the skillet into the other skillet. And now we're going to start adding our water. So I'm taking about 2 cups of water to start with. And when you're making your gravy, you don't want to just dump all the water in all at once, because now what we're going to do is all that flour that's been coated on our onions and our mushrooms is now going to make the base for our gravy. So we're just going to pour a little bit of the water in, and then we're going to stir. And you'll see that your gravy will start to form. Show you as I tilt my pan, you can see our gravy is starting to form. So we'll just keep adding our water. There's a lot of mushrooms in here. And we're just going to make sure that we kind of stir every area, because all of our mushrooms have kind of got that coating on there, and we want to make sure that we get all of the mushrooms and onions in here, and we get some good water around them so that we can have our good base for the gravy. Now so far I've used 2 cups of water. And that's producing a very, very good base for our gravy. And then what I'm going to do is I'm probably going to add maybe just a ½ cup more, because I want my gravy to be just a little watery. And I'll show you why. So we're going to add a ½ cup more of water to thin that gravy out. We're going to stir that and make sure it's blended really, really well. And then what we're going to do is we're going to take our steak, and this is how your steak is going to finish cooking. So we're going to go ahead and add the steak to the pan. And I don't know if you can see, but we've got all those little juices that have kind of come off from the steak, and they're going to go right into our pan as well. So we're going to go ahead and make sure all of our steak is covered in that gravy. We're going to separate those pieces. It smells so good. And then we're just going to reduce our heat. Actually, I'm going to let this come to a boil really quickly, and then I'm going to reduce the heat and simmer. And in just a second, I'm going to test those flavors. I'm going to add whatever else I need to add as far as spice-wise. If it needs a little bit more salt, a little bit more sage, a little bit more of whatever I've already seasoned it with, we'll go ahead and add that and make sure that it's coming together. And then once we have finished this dish, we'll come back and we'll plate it. We're going to have some delicious garlic mashed potatoes, some steamed peas, and then you can choose your bread of your choice. But you know, I'm off the bread right now. So I'll see you in a few minutes. All right, so our gravy has kind of cooked down, and we've allowed our steak to simmer. We've gone ahead and whipped up some garlic mashed potatoes and some buttered peas. So let's go ahead and plate. Now, like I said, this meal is not necessarily the most beautiful, but it is very tasty. And my mommy always said the meals that don't always look the best usually taste the best. So I'm just going to put a couple of pieces of the steak. Now, usually for me, it's fine for me to just eat one of these little pieces of cube steak. I'm going to go ahead and add our mashed potatoes, which they are nice and fluffy. I'm just going to put a nice little scoop of those on there. Now, if you are like me, I like to make a little dip in my mashed potatoes and load it up with gravy. And of course, like, that is the best part of this meal. Like, that's the whole reason I made this, is because I wanted this delicious gravy. So we're going to go ahead and put a nice little heaping portion of gravy on the plate. And then you always have to balance your meals out with a nice green veggie. You can also do a wonderful little salad. I usually like to do corn, asparagus, anything like that. But it's always nice to have a little veggie. And then ordinarily I would probably do like some sort of dinner roll, some Hawaiian roll or something. But again, because we're trying to be better about our eating habits, we're not doing that this time. And those potatoes are going to provide us with all of the carbs that we need. So this delicious meal is fantastic, right? Doesn't it look yummy? And your cube steak should be tender enough that all you have to do is use a butter knife in order to cut it. Yum, yum, yum. Well, listen, guys, I'm not going to test this out. I'm going to eat this and devour it when you're not looking. But I hope you guys have enjoyed this episode of The Dinner Bell. Make sure you have subscribed to Ask Me TV. Like, comment, and share with your friends. And, of course, you can always visit our website, discoverkcu.org/shop to get our Dinner Bell cookbook or any of the books that we have written. We love you, and we'll see you next time. Bon appetit.